Welcome, Freida.
Thank you. Before I start,
Yes.
could I just make some thank yous?
Absolutely.
Thank you for
It's your
being
night.
here. Okay, and I really wanted to thank AFI and Michael Lumpkin, and really the staff has been fabulous.
They're great.
Yeah.
I
And I just want to say one small story about actually meeting Charles Guggenheim.
Yes.
Because thank you, Grace, wherever you are, and thanks the family for creating this wonderful legacy. And I feel a little humbled to be here because I met him when we both actually were nominated in '95, and I just met him in a distance because I heard his name, and what struck me is that he just ambled up, nonplussed about going on stage and accepting his award, gave the most eloquent and extemporaneous, comments, and left, and I realized he was just like a walk in the park because, of course, this was his 4th Academy Award. That's why he was so, it's really, really cool about things. And of course, one of 12 nominations. So I sit here a little bit odd.
Well, we all
I'm very
do.
honored to be here.
He
So
casts
thank you.
a long, benevolent shadow, and we're all really grateful for his gifts over the years in his service. I'd like to start, if you don't mind, with sort of a cinematic biography. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up. Were movies a big part of your life growing up?
My parents are immigrants from China, and I grew up speaking Chinese until probably 4 or 5 when I went to school. And so it's a dual language. And I grew up in California, in Ojai, California. And the arts and films were not a source of conversation. I think I understand as a grown-up that being immigrants, their expectations were that you do well. There wasn't a lot of conversation really about going to, you're expected to do well, not embarrass the family.
Yep.
And when I received a small scholarship to go to Berkeley, my father said, "You're going to be a doctor." I said, "No, that wasn't something I had thought about." And anyway, I ended up being a documentary filmmaker. I studied history and English. I loved history, and I think the films that I ended up doing reflect a great deal of that. Social, political, historical aspects.
Was Berkeley the hotbed of political activism
Yes,
at the time
yes.
that it's known for? And where was the film world at, the nonfiction film world at that point? Were you aware of, were documentaries a thing at that time?
No, I think how I got into this field, I thought I'd do law. I went to law school for a short time, didn't like it. And then actually I just woke up one day and said, I want to make documentary films. It's as simple as that.
Did anything spark it? Had you seen something that inspired you?
I think actually I loved studying the progressive era of American history and all that muckraking and journalists being, or journalists, nonfiction writers being, the disruptors. And they were heroes to me. And I think that was kind of, that was very influential.
Yeah.
So I do feel that when I went into documentary filmmaking, it was just like, boom, I'm going to do that. Okay, it's simple. I said that once you know what you want to do, whether you want to be a farmer or a taxidermist or whatever, then it's easy. So I said I want to do documentary films, and so you find where to go.
Right.
I thought I wanted to do muckraking sort of in the Michael Moore sense, and so I sort of thought I realized that I felt I shouldn't be lecturing other people what they should be or think about. I found it was really uncomfortable. And instead, I really got involved in the art and craft by working in the field. My first job was working with David Wilbur Productions in Los Angeles back in, mid-'70s or so, late '70s. And that was a great place to be. It was a commercial place. It wasn't the networks. It was a place that was creating programs that did not have a strong, they were nonfiction, but they were not driven by who, what. It was a lot more story-driven.
Yeah.
So the first films or programs at the time were National Geographic, Jacques Cousteau, soft stories, you might say.
Well, what I think a lot of us, coming of age at that time, that's what we thought of when we thought of That was what we saw when we saw documentaries and that it, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it gave you a really solid footing in the fundamentals.
Yes, yeah. So, but actually making the film, that's, I didn't go to film school. That's what no one did in the, I think
Right.
back, you really went, if anything, you were doing journalism. A lot of
Right.
people going into nonfiction came out of that area, or the humanities.
Right. But again, you're learning visual storytelling, you know, from the kind of, by doing it, I would
Exactly.
imagine.
And I feel that having not studied it, I don't know what would have happened had I studied. I remember Michael Crichton saying that you can hire the best people, you know, if you have an idea. So maybe that was reassuring, that if you didn't do film school, which is what most people I find going into, a lot of people going into nonfiction now, and fiction, they are wonderful graduates of particularly AFI.
AFI, absolutely.
AFI, I mean, these last 2 films, I've worked with 4 AFI master's graduates. They're the best of all the students I've worked with. Yeah.
Okay, cut and print that.
So so I learned to make films by doing.
Yeah.
And I guess when we think about all the issues that confront women in the business, or women in general, opportunities, it's really about opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in those days, I think women started and maybe ended up in research, and maybe I wasn't sure if I were, you know, if in fact, although in nonfiction, the opportunities they're much more equitable. And
Right.
partly, as we know, it's because the budgets are much lower.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So the risks for people.
Right.
Yeah.
The threshold is lower.
Yeah.
But still, there's this, but the auteur idea follows, you know, I think the auteurist notion is a part of all film. And it's still difficult for women to really say, I want to be the voice of this film. I want to be the director of this. I want to be the name on it. Like you said, they tend to get, you know, they're editors, or they're researchers, or they're producing other people's work and nurturing other people's visions.
But it actually, in documentary films, you kind of can do it all. And in fact, because of the budget, you do it all.
Right, whether you want to or not.
Writing, directing, coffee, you know, you do. You know,
Yeah.
Lifting, you do. I
Yeah.
mean, and actually, it's great. You learn everything.
Absolutely. So were there particular mentors along the way that really, that you still, that, I mean, you know, sort of professional or personal life lessons that you still apply today, that you learned in those early years?
Let me think.
I know that's kind of a tough one to
Single out.
single out, but
I think people along the way were sort of reassuring. That's what I felt. But I just sort of observed, I think, and intuitively did things. And I guess people gave you feedback and said, "Oh, I guess I'm on the right track."
Right.
You know? But I mean, actually, when I first started, I thought, I'm not sure if I can, whatever making it means, you know. And that's when I started law school. And then I said, and then I came back, you know. And so it's been a pretty, what is it? Unpredictable.
Yeah.
But it's worked out, you know. Raised a couple of kids, and and it all works out.
tell me a little bit, as Michael said, you're a past master at portraiture, and I think we saw that in those clips, and it's portraiture of lives in full, but really just getting those close-ups on people, and it's just such a deep, you get these deep penetrating looks at people. Can you tell us a little bit about that process, that relational process to get the trust? And, you know, has anybody ever been particularly reluctant and you've had to sort of eke them out?
I think trust is basic, and I don't know how that it's just there or it's not there. Okay, and
How much time do you have to build? I mean, how do you start without a camera in your hand and just spend some time with them?
actually, I spend very little time with
Interesting.
people. I end up, let's say, like, as an example, MAYA LIN. I didn't know her. I thought it was a great idea when I heard that she was going to do her second memorial, the Civil Rights Memorial.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, why don't we do a story about war and race and bookend the film with war and race, the Vietnam Memorial and the Civil Rights Memorial, which is in Montgomery, Alabama. So I just wrote her a letter, and I'm so-and-so, I do this. Hadn't won, major anything, And if you know the film, and her process, she says, is like that.
Yeah.
It drops like an egg. She knows immediately. So what happens, I get a call. She says, hi, let's do it. I go, what do you have in mind? I said, nothing, because usually it's a great idea, I thought, that I'd heard she was doing her second memorial, but I hadn't done any of the research. And in order to do that up-close story, I need to do the primary research, the secondary research. I need to get the big picture to understand the story. So when she said, let's do it, I said, I hesitated, but ultimately I did meet her. Obvious, we met, and it's either there or not there. I don't know why whatever I wrote, it's always a short letter. I did the same with ANITA, and I did the same with Tony Kushner. By that time, I had won this, So
And we should note, Freida won the Oscar for MAYA LIN along the way. Just P.S.
Yeah.
P.S.
Yeah, Washington, right?
Oh, not for nothing.
Yeah. So then the trust is there, and the same way with ANITA, it was because I think, how do you get stories? How do you begin? And that's with I had received a call from her friend, an acquaintance, said that I'd like you to send the film you have on Tony Kushner. I said, sure. Why? I said, who? She said, well, I want this person to see what a good film looks like. And because she's often asked to participate in a film, she didn't tell me her name. And then I said, okay, fine. To whom do I send this? And she said, Anita Hill. I remember my voice went, Anita Hill, and I go, I hadn't heard about her for 20 years, almost 20 years. By that time, it was like 17 years, right before the 20th anniversary. I just maybe, some wheels were spinning. And so I wrote a note with a couple of films, including the Maya one. I said, if you're going to say yes to a filmmaker, would you consider me? That was it. And she called me. She said, what do you have in mind?
They always ask that, don't they? And then you
And I didn't have really a lot in mind, but I did know that it was the 20th anniversary is coming up, and that it would be something to look back on that with time. It would be interesting to see what exactly that was all about, because I was confused.
And how would you have ever known when you did that what would happen even in the interim between then and with Harvey Weinstein and Me Too and Brett Kavanaugh? I mean, it's mind blowing.
It's
timing
a
of
tip
that.
off. What she did, I feel she's a pioneer, in a pathfinder, and that we wouldn't be here today if she hadn't done that. And 1991 was the beginning of the dialogue and the conversation publicly that we could even say the words sexual harassment.
Right.
So the trust or the yes, let's go to make the film, it's pretty, my experience has been pretty, what did you feel about, but it's there, and it just, that's, as a filmmaker, I know it's critical to protect that.
Have you ever been put in a position of making a film with an unwilling subject where you have to kind of do the film around them?
Let me see. I think before I started when I was working for somebody, I remember we had to film the Milliken Company in South. And it was deep South. It was, right to work state. And I came down with a crew, including my baby. I had a 6-month-old child, and I brought a nanny, and And we were there to shoot, okay? And we walked in with a crew, and this was this plant that looked pretty old-fashioned and regressive. And they said, no, you can't shoot. I said, where's the film? There was the story. So yes, I've run into the situation. I did plan B. I think something happened that I was able to film. It wasn't in that plan. We just filmed some other places. But yes, but I didn't have a direct relationship with the powers of B. So that's probably a lesson. If you're going, you get yes maybe from maybe a lower echelon, a manager. That I think the lesson is you have to really talk to the people at the top in order to make sure you have all the permissions to do things. So otherwise, in most of these films, Tony was a little bit, maybe a couple more, 3 or 4 phone calls or letters, and then I think a friend of his said, she's okay.
And that idea was you germinated the Tony Kushner idea, or was
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. Half the films I do are self-starters, blank page and crazy idea, and you just run with it, and you do a proposal, and you raise the money, and it's all really self-starting. And fortunately, the other half is.
Sure.
It's that they, like this Return with Honor. It's a wonderful story. It came after they saw Maya Lin, and so you love that because they come with an idea, and it's just and they come with the funding.
Absolutely, and it was a perfect fit. That was a beautiful film. It's a great
story.
It's wonderful, and you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. Yeah.
Circling back to what do you have in mind, when does the structure, I was very interested in the Anita Hill film structure because the first hour is really revisiting the events of '91, and then you circle back and talk about the childhood. I mean, it's a little bit of an interesting, it's not strictly chronological, but do those structural choices emerge, I don't know, as you're filming in the editing? I mean, how
question.
Structured are you going in? Generally,
I have a very strong. I generally, if I know the beginning and the end, I think I can make the story work. Like in Maya, I knew that I wanted to get to the wall, by the way, which she would not go to.
Why?
It was a really difficult project for her.
Yeah.
And for her family.
Yeah.
You
You should explain to young people in the audience, it was hugely controversial at the time. You wouldn't know it today. It's such a beloved site and a sacred site, but at the time, it was very, very controversial and very painful.
In fact, before I would to depart, I think there's some people here. In fact, the one person who is involved, who is probably the co-founder of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, Robert Duback. Where? Pardon?
I'm here. There he is.
Robert Duback. He with Jan Scruggs.
Thank
together.
you. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Yeah. But the point is, in doing the story, I said I needed to show her with her projects, because it turns out to be not only war and race, it got to very much bigger, because when you meet the subject and get to know them and get in depth, she was doing projects dealing with the biggest issues of our day. She was doing war and race, peace, women, and ecology. So, the film got bigger and longer and deeper, and I think it was great to have that happen. But if I'd known it was going to be 5 years, probably wouldn't have done it, But thank God you're innocent when you're going to jump into these things. But I could not get her to get, you want to tie in. That's her biggest project. I mean, that's what she's famous for, and at the same time. And it was, in fact, Ross Perot who got her to go to, in the sense that when he ran for office, I think Bob Debeck and the guys made a pact with each other. They said, we'll all get together at the 10th anniversary if he doesn't win. Isn't that it, Bob Debeck?
Not quite.
Yeah, whatever you got, she went to the wall.
Yeah.
She went there. She had not visited it in 10 years.
Wow.
And it was a very difficult project for her. And there were issues of racism that she felt, including how her parents were treated. And so that point was that then I knew how the film was going to end.
Right.
We were talking about beginning to end. And therefore, the structure of the story, you do find the structure. I mean, I generally have a feeling, but it all works out in editing. You have to just.
That's where you write.
Like writing. You think you give a draft 1, draft 10, and so you just work together with a great editor.
I'd like to set up, we're running out of time. Please, let's set up what we're about to see, Ruth Ginsburg in her own words.
Yes. This is a project that came to me by 2 wonderful, with a number of executive producers. And of the group, 2 of them were supportive of the Anita film. And particularly one of them, Regina Scully, who supports a lot of documentary feature films, wanted her hero done into a film. So the project came to me, and I had a correspondence with the justice briefly. A mutual friend said she wanted to see the ANITA film, and she hadn't, and said, and the friend said, would you send it to her? And then we started. I was shocked. She wrote me. Thank you. I said, her time was more precious than doing this. But anyway, out of that experience, when the project came up, I wrote her about doing a film about her, and she said, let's wait until after the fiction movie came out in 2016.
And was the RBG already in the works by then?
No, because otherwise, you know what happens. When people ask you to do a film, has a film been done on The Return with Honor or whatever? There was no other film on the horizon, so they were only short 5-minute pieces. So I said, it's a good idea then. We should run with it. But then the fiction movie, she said, let's wait till that comes out. It didn't come out in 2016, but the election happened. So by 2017, we said, it's time to do the story and to have those values and that story out there. So our film, which came out, was probably about 5-6 months behind the other film. Yeah. So, this.
But it's a different approach than usual for you, right? A little bit, this one? In terms of the accent, like.
Yes, in terms of, I did, to do a film, again, I always do, as I said, the big picture, exploration, which includes visual material in this case, because she's had this beautiful long life. And so that determines how much visual materials you need to, and what exists, and how do you mix them all. And so we took months looking at hundreds and hundreds of hours of visual material that had been done on her. And there's some wonderful materials that you capture, that you see the justice when she can be a little more candid.
Yeah.
And less, appropriate.
Less
She says the word damn.
Politic.
You hear her. She says damn in this film. Back 20 years ago, I said that she couldn't do that now. But
amazing.
so we found that there were so many. As you'll see, there is wonderful material in which she speaks directly to you. Right. So when I wrote her about our film, saying that if you had time, I know she didn't have time to do following Maya, these, but that she had, but we realized that we could actually build a story very much with really beautiful materials that existed. Plus, you'll see we filmed other things, including here. I'd love to introduce one of the wonderful, not character persons in the film, and that's. She's the subject of a Supreme Court case called Lily Ledbetter versus Goodyear Tire Company. Would you stand up? Yeah. Yeah. Woo. And yeah. You can talk to her afterwards. How's that? And Delegate Foy, I don't know if Delegate Foy is here. Did we see you? She was, you'll see, she's incredible. She's the VMI story. And she's a delegate in the Virginia State House, among many other things she does, the wonderful AFI graduate, co-writer and editor of Ruth is Mike Aguilar. Yeah. My colleague. And, and the president of our company is Terry Sanders. Where is he? Yeah, there he is. Okay.
Also, also known as Mr. Freida Mock, I believe. You're bearing the lead.
Did I leave anybody out? But thank you, Ann Hornaday.
Thank you, Freida Mock.